Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation, we're talking with a member of WRAL's NC Capitol team, reporter Paul Specht, about what's happening in the state legislature surrounding the abortion debate. Less than a year ago, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, the landmark federal court decision that safeguarded the right to abortion in every state for the past 50 years. Now, it's up to the states to decide whether or not abortion is legal and under what circumstances. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So we're talking to you midday or mid-afternoon on Thursday. The House already voted on this bill that very much restricts abortion rights. So first of all, tell me what that vote was, and then how do the rights differ under what the federal law used to be?
Right. The vote was 71-46, and that was along party lines for the most part. And the bill essentially sets a ban at 12 weeks. And obviously that's a far cry from what used to be allowed under Roe v. Wade. That allowed abortions up until viability, generally considered to be the 24th or 26th week. And in North Carolina, it's funny, in 1973 is when Roe v. Wade, that ruling came out. And that same year, North Carolina lawmakers put in place an abortion ban at the 20th week of pregnancy. So still a little bit lower than what Roe allowed. And that stood for 50 years.
So it kind of superseded the federal law.
Right, up until a few years ago, when opponents challenged it and said, "Hey, this conflicts with what Roe allows," and a federal judge put it on hold. But then when Roe was overturned last year, it was put back in place. So that's where we are. The current law allows abortions up to the 20th week, with exceptions for the mother's health. This proposal would roll it back to the 12th week, with some exceptions as well. That's just the big picture.
So one of the biggest issues here is how this was fast-tracked. In just 24 hours from the introduction to that first vote there in the House, with very brief debate, what was the reasoning, if you know, for the fast-tracking?
I don't have an answer from Republican leaders, so we're sort of left to speculate. And what we know is they said they were going to put something together when they first got in office in January. And reporters have been asking about it every month because they said, now's the time we're gonna put in new restrictions. Anti-abortion groups have asked for this from Republicans for years, and then they sort of went underground with it. Republicans worked behind closed doors to try to build a consensus, and my understanding is that's hard. Like even within the Republican Party, there is not unity on, say, a total ban or a 6-week ban or a 15-week ban. My understanding is that this 12-week ban is a compromise.
They were working behind the scenes trying to come up with something that they could get that people would agree on.
Totally. And so my personal guess is that they're moving fast now because the bill is controversial, and they know that once it's introduced, you might have anti-abortion groups come to members of the Republican caucus and say, "Hey, this isn't strong enough for us. You need to, lobby for an even more restrictions."
And on the other side, you might have more pressure from people who want this to remain at 20 or 24 weeks, or something much more a different boundary.
Right.
They're talking about.
So if you're the Republican leaders and you have dozens of Republicans, you have to get dozens of Republicans on the same page, and then you do it. You want to strike while the iron is hot.
Understood.
And get it done. That's my guess.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned this, but I mean, this is really falling down party lines. So there are some politics at play here, especially when it comes to numbers. You have one high-profile situation where you had a lawmaker from Mecklenburg County switch parties. And I mean, this is a situation where every vote counts, correct?
That's right. Cooper obviously is a Democrat, and he's going to veto most, if not all, proposed abortion restrictions. Republicans can only override Cooper if they have a voting supermajority. That's 3/5 of the people who are on the floor. at the start of the year, they didn't have that. They were one seat shy in the House, and this is something they celebrated on election night last year. That we stopped Republicans from getting the supermajority. They were really proud of this, but they knew it was going to be hard, to keep the Democratic caucus together and unified through this session. Not everyone, has the same views. The math changed last month when Tricia Cotham, a House member from Mecklenburg County, left the Democratic Party and joined the Republicans, giving them the supermajority that they wanted all along. And on paper, they now have. And on Wednesday, she did vote for that abortion bill, despite a year ago, to the day, May 3rd, 2022, there's a tweet out there where she says, we need lawmakers who will stand up for abortion rights. A year later, this year, she's supporting the 12-week ban.
So basically, she switched parties and she switched her point of view. So very big, two very big decisions that impact this. Well, we will be back after the break with more from WRAL's Paul Specht about what's next for this legislation. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL's Paul Specht about the abortion legislation currently being considered by lawmakers here in North Carolina. So set the scene for us, if you will. I know there's been a lot of citizens who have been down there at the General Assembly in the last few days protesting, trying to get lawmakers to hear their point of view. What do you know about that, what the community is saying, how people are reacting to this?
It's so interesting because the legislative building is sort of set apart. It's in its own little spot in downtown Raleigh, and there aren't really restaurants over there. And so on any other given day, the sidewalks are full of kids going to those museums, and there aren't a lot of adults there to have their voices heard unless it's like an advocacy day or something like that. But since this bill came out, there have been press conferences in front of the building. There have been protesters going in and roaming the hallways, and that's a confusing building already as it is. And getting in the gallery and in the Capitol building. The lawmakers are on a lower level, and so if you want to go watch what's happening, you sort of have a little bit of stadium seating above them. And so, there have been people in the gallery even chanting at points when there were breaks. It's been busy, and people have tried to make their voices heard. And then
sounds like a lot of activity.
Yes, a lot more activity than there usually is. And then in the committee there's a joint committee on this bill on Wednesday. Democrats who had said, this is the first time we're seeing this bill is after it went online Tuesday night around 10:30, Wednesday morning at 9:00, there was a committee meeting, and they asked a ton of questions because they said this is the first time we're seeing it. The bill's 46 pages.
So they were kind of taken by surprise.
They knew it was in the works, but I don't think they did not know everything that was in that bill.
Sure, and it's 46 pages, so that's a lot of information to digest in a short period of time. And let's go back a little bit to be clear. There is the 12-week rule, which is what this bill, the kind of the benchmark of this bill. However, it doesn't restrict abortion there for everything. There are some exceptions, and what are those?
Exceptions for rape, incest, the mother's health, and then fetal abnormalities. We should also say the bill makes a distinction between surgical abortions and drug-induced abortions, which are a little more common. And Republicans say they did this because the drug-induced abortions, which are defined as sort of like a medical abortion, would be subject to a number of new rules. Before physicians can sign off on a medical abortion, they must verify that the, quote, probable gestational age of the fetus is no more than 70 days or 10 weeks. So that's a little bit so.
A restriction, yeah. Right. So for another restriction, and just to be clear, in terms of these other time limits. So I read in the reporting that we've done that incest and rape would be a 20-week limit. Fetal abnormalities would be a 24-week limit, and then the life of the mother, there would be no limit. So again, still taking into account those issues, even with that 12-week rule. So would doctors or the women face any penalties for performing or having an abortion outside of those 12 weeks?
The women would not. There are no penalties in this for women, but doctors who provide abortions that aren't allowed under this bill could face a $5,000 fine and the possibility of losing their license. The bill also creates a new Class D felony and a $250,000 fine for any physician who doesn't provide care for babies who survive a botched abortion. Now, Republicans have talked about this for years, about how they want to survive babies who survive. They want to protect,
take care of babies, yeah.
Right. And, experts have said that's rare. It almost never happens. Democrats suspect this is a backdoor way of getting more oversight on abortion clinics and physicians like that. But that's in there, too. And I'll plug our colleague here, Travis Fain. If you want to look up these details on our website, the story I'm drawing from is headlined, quote, "More in NC abortion bill than just a 12-week ban." Travis did a good job of explaining things there.
And again, I think there's some people who don't think this goes far enough, and there's some people who think it goes too far and could lead to a total ban. So really strong feelings on both sides.
Right. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is running for governor now, and since he's been in office and even before that, he's referred to abortion as murder, and he's taken a really hard stance against it. That's sort of what he's known for. And so in this upcoming election, Democrats are going to say, well, if this 12-week ban passes, imagine if a Republican gets in the governor's mansion. Imagine if Republicans win more seats in the legislature. They may go even further and put in even more restrictions.
Absolutely. A lot to unpack here, a lot to think about. And so we expect this to end up on the governor's desk.
That's right. We expect it to go to his desk this week. He has a certain number of days to consider it and veto it. Cooper historically takes the days allotted to him. He'll veto a lot of the bills that go to his desk that he doesn't like on the last or second to last day. So it's possible that the votes to override him don't happen for another week or so.
Paul, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. I know you and your team are going to continue to follow it. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's an email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, headlines, and events to get you ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.